Hello and welcome to Lost Love Mystery, where we explore the twists and turns of love, the pain of betrayal, and the mysteries that lie hidden in the heart. Daniel Terrell despised the regular gatherings at the country club. To him, they were a parade of shallow, egotistical displays by the wealthy, designed to make everyone else feel inferior. Unfortunately, his wife, Laura, lived for these events. After 24 years of marriage, Daniel knew better than to argue with her about it. He would attend begrudgingly, nursing a single drink in the corner while Laura mingled and charmed her circle of affluent friends. Over the past year, her drinking had increased significantly, and with it came a growing number of embarrassing moments. What had started as a storybook romance had cooled into distant cohabitation. Daniel and Laura had met when he was pursuing his MBA, and their early years together were full of promise. But as time wore on, Laura became more enamored with the comforts of wealth while Daniel longed for simplicity. They raised 3 children, all now in college, and lived in a sprawling house that Daniel thought too large for just the two of them. Laura refused any suggestion of downsizing. She adored the image their grand home projected, even as the maintenance costs ate into Daniel's salary. Daniel's work as a senior executive brought in a substantial income, but he found little joy in it. His job had become a means to sustain a lifestyle he no longer wanted. The house, the cars, the vacations, and Laura's indulgent spending at spas and boutiques. It all felt hollow. He wished for something simpler, something fulfilling. But Laura resisted change at every turn, dismissing his suggestions as foolish. Her world revolved around their social status, the country club scene, and her carefully curated image of perfection. It was during one of these country club parties that everything fell apart. Daniel had been drifting through the event, detached and bored, when he overheard Laura's voice rise above the chatter. She was speaking with a group of women, her tone uninhibited by the alcohol she had consumed. Hell, if it wasn't for Mark Benson, I would never have had any good lovemaking in my life. Laura laughed loudly, oblivious to Daniel standing nearby. The group fell silent, their eyes darting to Daniel in awkward recognition. Laura turned, tipsy and unapologetic, and simply said, "Oh, Daniel, you weren't supposed to hear that. My mistake, darling." Her smirk stung more than her words. Humiliated, Daniel quietly left the party, making a decision that would change everything. Humiliated and seething, Daniel didn't return home after the party. Instead, he drove straight to the airport, parked his car in the long-term lot, and purchased a one-way ticket to Reno. There was no grand plan. He simply needed space, clarity, and distance from the unraveling mess that was his marriage. Reno, with its reputation as a quieter alternative to Las Vegas, appealed to him as a place to gather his thoughts. When Daniel arrived, he checked into a casino hotel and indulged in the anonymity that came with being just another guest. He opened a casino account with $20,000, a sum that allowed him to secure a complimentary room and explore the city on his terms. While he wasn't a gambler, he appreciated the financial systems in place. Deposits were untraceable, offering him a layer of protection from any prying eyes back home. The next morning, Daniel wandered the streets of Reno, reflecting on his life. He strolled along the Truckee River, its calm waters offering a stark contrast to the turmoil in his mind. He thought about his marriage and how it had deteriorated. Laura's relentless pursuit of status and her disregard for his feelings had left him emotionally drained. Now, her infidelity was laid bare, a public humiliation he could no longer ignore. As he walked, he passed a real estate office with photos of condos displayed in the window. The idea of owning a small place in Reno took hold, a retreat where he could start over. By the end of the day, he had arranged a lease-to-buy agreement for a modest, furnished unit. It wasn't grand, but it felt like a step toward independence. He ensured the transaction was discreet, leaving no trail that Laura could follow. That evening, Daniel treated himself to a quiet dinner at a sushi restaurant. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of control. Back at the casino, he deposited another $10,000 into his account, solidifying his financial safeguards. He recorded every transaction meticulously in a notebook, creating a paper trail of plausible gambling losses. To anyone looking in, It would appear he was just another high roller losing money to the house. As Daniel lay in his hotel bed that night, he knew this was just the beginning. Reno wasn't the answer to all his problems, but it was a start, a place to rebuild and plan his next move. Daniel's days in Reno began to settle into a routine. He would explore the city by day and return to the casino by evening. On one such morning, he found himself at the hotel restaurant for breakfast. While sipping coffee and pondering his next steps, he noticed his waitress, a woman in her mid-40s, with an unmistakable black eye. Though she tried to hide it with makeup, the bruising was still visible. Something about her demeanor, determined yet cautious, piqued his curiosity. The waitress's name tag read Donna, but when Daniel asked if that was her real name, she chuckled. "No, it's Emma." Donna was just the closest tag they had, she admitted with a hint of humor, despite the obvious pain she was trying to mask. Daniel couldn't resist asking about her black eye, though his approach was gentle. "I'll leave you a bigger tip if you tell me the story behind it." Emma gave him a measured look before responding. "Why don't I pour you another coffee, and you can leave the same tip while I overlook that question?" she replied, deflecting his inquiry, but not without a small smile. Daniel respected her boundaries, but her resilience intrigued him. Over the next couple of days, Daniel and Emma crossed paths several times. He noticed her working double shifts, her energy waning but her determination unwavering. On one evening, as she delivered his check, Emma unexpectedly opened up. "The black eye? It's a parting gift from my soon-to-be ex-husband. I told him I wanted a divorce, and he didn't take it well," she said, her voice tinged with both defiance and sadness. Daniel admired her bravery in sharing something so personal. He responded with kindness, expressing his empathy without prying further. Emma's honesty struck a chord with him. She reminded him of himself in some ways, someone seeking a fresh start from a toxic relationship. The following morning, as he finished his coffee, an idea began to take shape. Emma seemed trustworthy and in need of a break from her struggles. Daniel approached her with a proposition. "I'll be leaving Reno for a while. Would you be interested in house-sitting my condo? It's nearby, and it'll be yours to stay in until I return." Emma hesitated, wary of the offer's sincerity, but something about Daniel's demeanor reassured her. "All right," she said cautiously. "But don't expect me to do any cleaning," she added with a smirk. For the first time in weeks, Daniel felt like he wasn't entirely alone in his journey. Back in Baltimore, Daniel wasted no time in putting his plans into action. He was determined to sever his ties to Laura in a way that left her with as little leverage as possible. His first stop was the bank, where he secured a second mortgage on their home, taking out more than the property's current value. He knew that by the time Laura realized what had happened, he would have funneled the funds into safer, untraceable places. Next, Daniel prepaid the college tuition for all three of his children. Auburn University happily accepted the $240,000 wire transfer, ensuring his kids wouldn't need to worry about finances regardless of what happened between him and Laura. With that burden lifted, he cashed in 2 certificates of deposit, paying the penalties without hesitation, and emptied a money market account. He left the credit cards untouched, for now, but made a mental note to deal with them before the month was over. At work, Daniel's loyal secretary, Sophia, was quick to notice his change in demeanor. "Good morning, Mr. Terrell." She greeted him with her usual coffee in hand. "Are you going to fill me in on what happened at the country club, or should I just rely on the rumors?" Daniel managed a wry smile. "The rumors are probably accurate, Sophia," he admitted. "What I need from you now is to help me dig into someone named Mark Benson. He used to work here, but I'm not sure of the details. Also, I need you to coordinate my workload so I can step back for a while." Sophia, always reliable, left his office with a smile and a thumbs up. Daniel trusted her implicitly. As he settled into his desk, he placed a call to Mike, his college friend and divorce lawyer. Mike had always disliked Laura, making him the perfect person to handle the case. When Daniel arrived at Mike's office later that day, he laid everything out: the infidelity, the humiliation, and his plans to leave Laura with nothing but the house. "I need your help making this airtight," Daniel told him. Mike nodded, already drafting a strategy in his head. "We'll get started immediately, but you need to stay calm. Don't engage with Laura directly, and let me handle the details. Daniel left the meeting feeling more in control. For the first time in years, he wasn't reacting to life. He was taking charge of it. The pieces of his plan were falling into place. As Daniel moved forward with his plan, Sophia delivered the information he requested. It was worse than he expected. Mark Benson, the man Laura had drunkenly boasted about, wasn't her only conquest. Digging deeper, Sophia uncovered that Laura had a history of manipulating others, especially men who worked under Daniel. One of these men was Ethan, a former colleague who had been a rising star in the company 6 years prior. Sophia relayed the details with her usual professionalism, but even she couldn't hide her disdain for Laura. Ethan was a decent man, Sophia explained, married, with 2 kids. But at one of the office events, Laura cornered him. She seduced him, then blackmailed him into continuing the affair. When he tried to end it, she threatened to tell his wife. The story only got worse. Ethan had called Laura's bluff, and within days, his wife found out. The fallout was devastating. Ethan's marriage collapsed, and he spiraled into a depression that led to heavy drinking. He eventually lost his job, and no one knew where he ended up after that. There's a rumor that Laura paid his wife $10,000 to keep quiet, Sophia added. I couldn't find hard evidence, but it fits her pattern. Daniel absorbed this information in silence. He wasn't just angry, he was disgusted. For years, he had turned a blind eye to Laura's increasingly selfish behavior, but this crossed every line. The woman he had once loved had destroyed lives without remorse. Mike, ever the strategist, saw an opportunity in the revelations. This gives us leverage, he told Daniel. If we can track Ethan down, a statement from him would strengthen your case. It paints Laura as manipulative, controlling, and morally bankrupt. Exactly the image we need, but Daniel hesitated. As much as he wanted to hold Laura accountable, he didn't want to drag others into the mess unless absolutely necessary. Let's see if we can win this cleanly, he said. I don't want to make this any messier than it already is. In the meantime, Daniel worked to finalize his financial safeguards. He closed shared accounts, canceled credit cards, and ensured Laura couldn't access his remaining assets. Every move was calculated, and with Mike's help, he was confident that Laura wouldn't be able to outmaneuver him. By the end of the week, Daniel felt a small but significant shift. For the first time in years, he wasn't just reacting to Laura's actions. He was one step ahead of her. With his financial safeguards in place and divorce proceedings underway, Daniel felt it was time to return to Reno. He booked an early morning flight, eager to escape the chaos back home. As his plane touched down, he felt a strange sense of relief, as if the physical distance from Baltimore allowed him to breathe more freely. When Daniel arrived at his condo, he was pleasantly surprised. Emma had not only taken good care of the place, but had also added small touches to make it feel more like a home. Fresh flowers adorned the dining table, and the rooms were impeccably clean. Daniel found her sitting on the couch, sipping a glass of wine. You're back sooner than I expected, Emma said with a smile. I needed to get away, Daniel replied. How have things been here? Quiet, she said. Thanks to you, I've had a safe place to stay. It's been nice to have a little peace for once. Over dinner that evening, Daniel and Emma talked more openly. She shared details about her past, including the abusive marriage she had left behind. Her husband, Alex, had been controlling and violent, and leaving him had taken every ounce of courage she had. This black eye, she said, gesturing to the fading bruise on her face, was his way of saying goodbye. Daniel listened intently, empathizing with her struggles. In Emma, he saw a reflection of his own journey, someone trying to rebuild a life after betrayal and pain. For the first time in years, Daniel felt comfortable opening up about his own troubles. He told Emma about Laura's infidelity and the years of emotional distance in their marriage. It sounds like you've been through hell, Emma said, but you're doing something about it, and that's more than most people can say. By the end of the meal, Daniel felt a growing connection to Emma. She was honest, resilient, and grounded, qualities that stood in stark contrast to Laura's superficiality. As they cleared the dishes, Daniel proposed a toast. To fresh starts, he said, raising his glass. To fresh starts, Emma echoed, clinking her glass against his. That night, as Daniel lay in bed, he felt a flicker of hope. Reno wasn't just a hiding place anymore. It was becoming the foundation of a new chapter. And while he didn't know where things with Emma might lead, he was grateful for her presence in his life. The days in Reno took on a rhythm that Daniel found surprisingly comforting. He spent his mornings walking along the Truckee River, afternoons organizing his finances, and evenings sharing quiet meals with Emma. Their conversations grew deeper, touching on fears, dreams, and regrets. For Daniel, the connection felt natural, unforced, a sharp contrast to the strained, transactional relationship he had endured with Laura. One evening, as they sat on the condo's small balcony overlooking the city, Emma surprised Daniel with a question. "Why are you still wearing your wedding ring?" she asked, her voice gentle but curious. Daniel stared at the band on his finger, a symbol that had long lost its meaning. "Habit, I guess," he admitted. "Or maybe because taking it off feels like admitting everything is truly over." Emma nodded, understanding. "Sometimes we cling to things, even when they've already let go of us." The conversation stayed with Daniel. The next morning, during his walk by the river, he removed the ring and held it in his palm. It felt heavy, weighted with years of love, betrayal, and disappointment. With a deep breath, he tossed it into the water, watching as it disappeared beneath the surface. He felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation, but mostly, he felt ready to move forward. Later that day, Daniel received an update from Mike. The divorce proceedings were progressing, but Laura had started fighting back. She had hired an aggressive lawyer and was contesting the financial arrangements, claiming that Daniel was hiding assets. Mike assured him they were prepared for this. "Don't worry," Mike said. "We've got the evidence to back up your case. Let her squirm." As if to compound the stress, Mike also informed Daniel of another complication. Laura had hired a private investigator. "She's looking for you, Daniel," Mike warned, "and she's not doing it quietly. It's only a matter of time before someone connects the dots." The news unsettled Daniel. He had taken great care to cover his tracks, but he knew nothing was foolproof. As he shared the update with Emma that evening, her brow furrowed with concern. "What if they find you?" she asked. "They won't," Daniel said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "And even if they do, I'm not going back." Emma reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "Whatever happens, you're not alone," she said softly. For the first time in weeks, Daniel smiled. "Thank you," he replied, and he meant it. The calm in Reno didn't last long. A week after Daniel received the warning from Mike about the private investigator, he noticed subtle signs that something was amiss. A black SUV had been parked near the condo for hours, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. When he went for his usual walk along the Truckee River, he thought he spotted someone following him at a distance, but they disappeared before he could confirm it. Daniel shared his concerns with Emma over dinner that evening. She listened intently, her face serious. "Do you think it's the private investigator Mike mentioned?" she asked. "Could be," Daniel replied. "Or worse, someone Laura's hired for more than just spying." Emma's expression darkened. "You mean, like a hitman?" Daniel didn't respond right away. He had been trying to push the thought out of his mind, but Emma's words brought it to the forefront. "It's possible," he admitted finally. "Laura's not above it." Emma looked down at her plate, her appetite gone. "We need to be careful, Daniel. If someone's watching you, it's not safe to stay here." They decided to lay low for a while, keeping the lights off at night and avoiding predictable routines. Daniel also took steps to protect his financial assets, visiting several casinos to withdraw the money he had deposited earlier. By the end of the day, he had over $600,000 in cash and chips, which he placed in a rented safety deposit box at a small, nondescript bank in Carson City. As they were packing their essentials to leave the condo temporarily, the situation escalated. Daniel returned from a quick errand to find Emma standing by the window, her face pale. "He's here," she whispered. "The man in the SUV. He's parked right outside." Daniel's heart pounded. He glanced outside and saw the black SUV idling by the curb. A man in a leather jacket stepped out and began walking toward the building. Without thinking, Daniel grabbed Emma's hand. "We're leaving now," he said. They exited through the back, slipping into a side alley that led to the parking garage. Daniel's car was parked 2 blocks away, hidden in a lot he rarely used. As they drove out of Reno under cover of darkness, Daniel felt a mix of relief and dread. They had escaped this time, but the shadow of danger loomed larger than ever. "We'll figure this out," Daniel said, gripping the wheel tightly. Emma nodded, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We have to." Daniel and Emma fled Reno, driving west through the night. They ended up in Grass Valley, a small town off the beaten path, and checked into a modest roadside motel. The room was basic but clean, and more importantly, it felt far enough away from the immediate danger. They agreed to lay low for a few days, hoping the shadowy figure in the SUV wouldn't find them. Despite the safety of the motel, Emma's anxiety was evident. "Do you think he'll track us here?" she asked, her voice shaky as she unpacked a few essentials. "I don't know," Daniel admitted, "but we can't assume he won't. We need to stay cautious." The next day, Daniel ventured out to a nearby shopping center to buy new clothes and burner phones for both of them, ensuring they couldn't be tracked through their previous devices. Meanwhile, Emma stayed behind, using makeup to conceal her still visible bruises. She spent much of the day pacing the room, her thoughts racing. By the time Daniel returned, he noticed Emma's unease had deepened. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the window. "Daniel," she began, hesitating before continuing. "I don't know if it's safe for you to be around me." "What are you talking about?" Daniel asked, setting down the shopping bags. "It's Tony," Emma said, referring to her abusive husband. "He might be looking for me too. If he finds out I'm with you, it could make things worse." Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Emma, we're in this together now. Whatever happens, we'll face it." That night, as they tried to sleep, a noise outside startled them. Daniel peeked through the curtain and froze. A familiar figure stood in the parking lot, flanked by 2 others. It was Tony, Emma's ex-husband, and he wasn't alone. "They found us," Daniel whispered. "We need to go. Now." They quickly gathered their belongings and slipped out the back door. Avoiding the parking lot entirely, they made their way down a side street. Daniel's car was parked at a nearby lot, a precaution he had taken earlier in case of an emergency like this. As they drove off, headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. "They're following us," Emma said, her voice trembling. Daniel's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Hold on," he said, making a sharp turn onto a smaller, winding road. The pursuit intensified, but Daniel's focus was unwavering. For the next several minutes, the car chase felt like a high-stakes game of survival. Finally, Daniel spotted an opportunity. He pulled off onto a narrow dirt road, killed the headlights, and parked behind a dense cluster of trees. They sat in silence as Tony's car sped past, unaware of their hiding spot. Emma exhaled in relief, but the fear in her eyes hadn't faded. "We can't keep running forever," she said. "We won't have to," Daniel replied, though he wasn't sure how they would end this. One thing was certain, neither of them could face their pasts alone. After narrowly escaping Tony and his brothers, Daniel and Emma decided it was too dangerous to return to their condo in Reno. They drove to Carson City instead, where Daniel accessed the safety deposit box he had rented earlier. Inside was the cash and casino chips he had hidden away, the lifeline he needed to stay ahead of Laura and whoever else might be chasing him. Emma's concern lingered as she watched Daniel sort through the money. "What are we going to do?" she asked. Daniel looked at her, his expression resolute. "First, we secure this money somewhere safer. Then, we figure out our next steps. We'll stay one step ahead of them." Emma nodded, trusting Daniel's judgment. She had come to rely on his calm demeanor in the face of chaos, even though she knew he was just as scared as she was. They moved the money to another bank in Carson City, spreading it across multiple accounts to avoid detection. Feeling a temporary sense of security, they decided to return to the condo in Reno the following evening to retrieve Daniel's personal belongings, including his passport and laptop. Daniel parked a block away from the building, instructing Emma to stay in the car while he checked the area. As he entered the parking garage beneath the condo, a voice stopped him cold. "Daniel Terrell, turn around." Daniel turned to see a wiry man in a long leather coat, his hand gripping a gun. The man smirked. "Your wife sent me," he said, his tone almost amused. Daniel stayed calm, his mind racing. "All right," he said. "What do you need from me?" "Your wallet and your wedding ring," the man replied. "Gotta make this look like a robbery gone wrong." Daniel handed over his wallet, but hesitated with the ring. "Why go through all this trouble? She doesn't have the money to pay you." The man's smirk faded. "What do you mean?" Before Daniel could answer, the situation escalated. 3 burly men in leather jackets appeared, shouting Daniel's name. Tony and his brothers had found him again. The hitman turned his gun toward them, startled by their sudden arrival. In the chaos that followed, gunfire erupted, echoing through the garage. Daniel seized the opportunity and bolted toward the exit, adrenaline fueling his escape. He reached the car, where Emma was anxiously waiting. "Drive!" he shouted, jumping into the passenger seat. Emma sped away from the condo as Daniel tried to catch his breath. "Who were those men?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Trouble," Daniel replied. "But they just became each other's problem. For now, they were safe." But Daniel knew this wasn't over. The web of danger was tightening, and he needed a plan to end it for good. As Emma drove away from the chaos at the condo, Daniel's mind raced. The hitman, Tony, and his brothers had converged in the same place at the same time. A dangerous coincidence that could have cost him his life. He couldn't keep running. He had to take control of the situation. "We need to disappear for a while," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the turmoil. "But first, we're going to make sure they can't find us again." Emma glanced at him, her hands gripping the wheel tightly. "How do we do that?" "We leave them breadcrumbs," Daniel explained. "Something to throw them off our trail." The first step was to get rid of Daniel's car. They drove to a nearby salvage yard, where Daniel sold it for cash, ensuring it would be scrapped within the week. Using some of the money from his safety deposit box, he purchased an older, unassuming sedan, a car that would blend in anywhere. Next, they booked a motel in a small town on the Nevada-California border, using cash and fake names. The plan was simple: stay out of sight while Daniel strategized their next move. That evening, as they sat in the dimly lit motel room, Daniel called Mike, his attorney. "Mike, I need an update," Daniel said, keeping his voice low. "What's happening on your end?" Mike sighed. "Laura's in trouble. Big trouble. The hitman she hired, Victor Cruz, got caught up in that shootout at the condo. He was arrested and sang like a canary. He told the police everything. That Laura hired him to kill you." Daniel leaned back in his chair, a grim satisfaction settling over him. "So, she's been arrested?" "She's in jail, awaiting trial," Mike confirmed. "But that's not all. Tony and his brothers were also picked up after the shootout. Seems they were looking for Emma, but Victor's confession connected them to other crimes. They're facing serious charges." Relief washed over Daniel, but it was tempered by caution. "What about me? Am I still a target?" "For now, you're in the clear," Mike said. "But stay out of sight. Laura's lawyer might try to drag you into this mess during the trial." After the call, Daniel shared the news with Emma. "Laura's in jail, and Tony's locked up too," he said. "For the first time in weeks, I feel like we can breathe." Emma smiled faintly. "Does this mean it's over?" "Not yet," Daniel replied. "But we're close." For the first time in weeks, they allowed themselves to relax. But Daniel knew there was one final step to ensure their freedom: closing the door on the past for good. With Laura, Tony, and Victor Cruz all behind bars, Daniel and Emma finally felt the weight of danger lifting. But they weren't ready to settle just yet. Daniel was determined to make sure every loose end was tied before they rebuilt their lives. The first step was recovering the money Daniel had hidden in Carson City. They drove there early in the morning, careful to avoid drawing attention. At the bank, Daniel accessed the safety deposit box, relieved to find everything intact. As they walked out, Emma hesitated. "What's the plan now?" she asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Daniel considered her question. For weeks, his life had been about survival, but now he could finally think beyond just staying one step ahead. "We start over," he said. "Somewhere far away." Emma nodded, her trust in Daniel unwavering. "What about your kids?" "They're adults now," Daniel replied. "I'll reach out to them once things settle. For now, I need to focus on making sure they're not dragged into this mess." Over the next few days, Daniel finalized the divorce proceedings through Mike. Laura, facing charges for attempted murder, had no bargaining power and quickly signed the papers. The court granted Daniel the house and full control of his remaining assets, though he had no intention of returning to Baltimore. Emma, too, made strides toward her freedom. Her Mexican divorce from Tony was expedited, allowing her to sever ties with her abusive past. With their legal entanglements nearly resolved, Daniel proposed an idea. What if we go to Mexico? Not permanently, just to take a breather and figure out what's next. Emma smiled. I've never been, but I like the sound of it. A week later, they arrived in Guadalajara. Using some of the money from the Carson City deposit, Daniel purchased a beautiful hacienda on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't ostentatious, but it was charming and peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos they had left behind. One evening, as they shared dinner on the patio, Daniel reached across the table and took Emma's hand. I couldn't have gotten through this without you, he said. Emma squeezed his hand, her eyes warm. We've both been through a lot, Daniel, but I think we've earned this. Though their journey had been harrowing, Daniel and Emma found solace in each other. For the first time in years, Daniel felt at peace. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape, free from the shadows of betrayal and danger.